It is a truth universally acknowledged that a prince of the realm, possessed of both title and fortune, must eventually marry. So it was in the case of His Royal Highness Prince Philip Montague, Duke of Westmoreland, whose 30 years of bachelorhood had become something of a national concern. Indeed, the matchmaking mammas of London had begun to despair that this particular royal might never be caught, for he had evaded their most cunning traps with the nimble dexterity of a fox outrunning the hounds. Another season nearly passed, and still our prince remains unattached, lamented Lady Harrington to her companion at Lady Featherington's spring ball. It is positively criminal for a man of such standing to deny England a duchess and heirs. Perhaps he finds the selection wanting, her friend replied with a sniff, while casting a meaningful glance toward her own daughter, who was presently engaged in a country dance. What neither lady knew, what indeed no one knew, was that Prince Philip had once given his heart completely, foolishly, and irretrievably to a most unsuitable match. A match so beneath his station that even the whisper of it would have caused the oak tun to collapse into their teacups in collective apoplexy. For Prince Philip had, in his youth of 21, fallen desperately in love with a servant girl. This particular recollection was not one that the prince often permitted himself, having locked away both the memory and the evidence of that ill-fated attachment some 9 years prior. But fate, that capricious mistress, had seen fit to resurrect the ghost of his past affection in the most unexpected of ways. It had begun innocently enough. The prince, temporarily removed to his country estate of Montague Park for a respite from London's unending social demands, had found himself at loose ends. A sudden rainstorm had prevented his morning ride, leaving him to wander the halls of his ancestral home like a restless spectre. Your Highness, his butler, Simmons, addressed him with a bow, might I suggest a review of the library holdings? The East Wing shelves have not been properly catalogued since your father's time. A mundane task, to be sure, but one which appealed to Philip's methodical nature. Yes, Simmons, a fine suggestion. I shall attend to it immediately. The task soon evolved from simple cataloguing to a complete reorganization, which in turn led the prince to explore the rarely used servant passages that connected to the library. It was during this exploration that Philip discovered a small chamber, evidently once used as living quarters, tucked beneath the eaves of the East Wing. The room was sparsely furnished, a narrow bed, a simple dressing table, and a small trunk. It was this last item that drew the prince's attention, for it bore his own royal crest upon its lid. Curiosity piqued, Philip opened the trunk, expecting perhaps to find forgotten household items. Instead, he found his own handwriting staring back at him, dozens of letters, tied with faded blue ribbon, addressed in his youthful hand to my dearest Felicity. The shock of it nearly sent him to his knees. Felicity Sullivan. The name he had forbidden himself to utter for nearly a decade. The servant girl who had captured his heart during his first season, who had disappeared without trace after he had declared his intention to defy convention and make her his bride. The prince gathered the letters with trembling hands. How had they come to be here, in this forgotten room? Felicity had worked at his London townhouse, not at Montague Park. These letters, foolish, passionate declarations that they were, should have vanished with her. Simmons, he called, his voice echoing in the small chamber. Simmons. The butler appeared with remarkable alacrity, as though he had been hovering nearby. Who occupies this room? Philip demanded. No one at present, Your Highness. It was last used by the under-librarian, who left our employ some 6 months ago. And before that? I would need to consult the household records, sir. This particular chamber has seen many occupants over the years, being convenient to the library. Philip clutched the packet of letters tightly. Do so immediately. I wish to know every person who has resided in this room for the past decade. Simmons bowed and withdrew, leaving the prince alone with the ghosts of his past affection. Against his better judgment, Philip untied the ribbon and selected a letter at random. My dearest Felicity ***, how cruel that protocol demands I spend these hours at Lord Huxley's dinner when every fibre of my being wishes only to be in your presence. I watched you tonight, moving quietly among the guests with the wine tray, and I marveled that no one else could see the light that surrounds you. Are they all blind? Or is it that this radiance is visible only to one whose heart you have utterly captured? ***, I count the hours until our next meeting in the garden. Until then, I remain eternally yours. ***. Philip. The prince closed his eyes, remembering the clandestine meetings, the stolen kisses, the promises whispered beneath the stars. How young he had been. How foolish. Your Highness. Simmons had returned with remarkable efficiency. I have consulted the records. This room has had 7 occupants in the past decade, all of them in service to the library or household administration. Their names: Simmons. The butler produced a list. Philip scanned it quickly, his heart racing as his eyes fell upon the final entry. Miss F. Stanwood, under librarian. Employed October 15, 1811, to January 3, 1812. This Miss Stanwood, Philip said carefully. What became of her? She secured a position with the Duchess of Wellington, I believe. A favorable advancement in her circumstances. And her appearance. Simmons hesitated, clearly puzzled by his master's interest in a former servant. I recall her as being of medium height, with light brown hair. A pleasant countenance, though not remarkable. Quite scholarly in her habits. Light brown hair. Felicity had possessed hair the color of autumn honey, which glowed like beaten gold in sunlight. But hair could be darkened, and 9 years could change a person considerably. I wish the direction of her current residence, Philip commanded. And Simmons, this matter is to remain between us. Of course, Your Highness. 2 days later, Prince Philip found himself in an elegant but modest drawing-room in Mayfair, awaiting the appearance of the lady who now called herself Miss Stanwood. The Duchess of Wellington had been most accommodating when informed that the prince wished to speak with her librarian on a matter of historical significance. No one questioned royalty too closely. The door opened, and Philip rose from his seat. She had changed, the fresh-faced girl had matured into a composed woman, but he would have known her anywhere. The honey-gold hair was indeed darkened to a subdued brown and confined in a severe chignon, but the eyes were the same, intelligent, deep green, with flecks of gold near the pupil. Your Highness, she said, curtsying deeply. Her voice betrayed no emotion, no recognition. I understand you wish to consult me on a historical matter. Philip dismissed the hovering servant with a wave of his hand. When they were alone, he produced the packet of letters. I believe these belong to you, Miss Stanwood. Or should I say, Miss Sullivan? She paled slightly but maintained her composure. I haven't used that name in many years, Your Highness. Evidently not. Nor have you seen fit to return my correspondence. On the contrary, she replied, her chin lifting slightly. I left them where I believed they would eventually find their way back to you. The servants' quarters at Montague Park seemed the safest repository. Safe? My most private thoughts, my declarations of, he stopped himself. Anyone might have found them. The trunk bears your seal. No servant would dare open it without permission. She folded her hands neatly before her. I never intended to keep them, but nor could I simply destroy them. They were precious to me once. The once struck him like a physical blow. Why did you leave without a word? He asked, the question that had haunted him for 9 years finally finding voice. I had plans for us. I was prepared to defy convention, to face the consequences. Which is precisely why I left, Your Highness. Her gaze was steady, though her hands had tightened their clasp. You spoke of love transcending station, of marriage. Did you truly believe such a thing possible for a prince of the realm and a serving girl? I would have found a way. No, she said gently. You would have been forced to choose between your duty and your heart. And whatever choice you made would have brought you unhappiness. So you made the choice for me. Bitterness tinged his words. I made the choice for both of us. She glanced down at the letters. You were young, idealistic. I was even younger, and dazzled by your attention. But I knew what the world would say, what it would do to both of us. I chose to spare us that pain. Philip studied her face, searching for the girl he had loved. She was there, beneath the composed exterior of Miss Stanwood, but tempered now by experience and, he suspected, by hardship. "And what of your life since then?" he asked. "Have you found happiness in your choice?" "I have found purpose," she replied carefully. "After leaving your service, I was fortunate enough to secure education through the kindness of a former employer. I discovered a talent for organization and a love of literature. My position with the Duchess is both respectable and fulfilling." "But no husband?" "No family." A faint flush colored her cheeks. "Not all women require marriage for contentment, Your Highness." "And if I told you that I never forgot you? That no lady of the ton, despite their accomplishments and connections, has ever affected me as you did? Then I would suggest that perhaps you have idealized a memory," she said softly. "The girl you knew no longer exists, if indeed she ever did outside your imagination." Her words stung, but Philip recognized the truth in them. Perhaps he had built Felicity into something more than she was, preserved her in amber while he himself had grown and changed. Perhaps, he conceded. Or perhaps something rare and genuine existed between us, which deserves more than to be dismissed as youthful fancy. She did not reply, but her eyes revealed a flicker of emotion quickly suppressed. "I should return to my duties," she said after a moment. "The Duchess expects a catalogue of recent acquisitions by tomorrow." Philip nodded, suddenly reluctant to end their meeting. "May I call upon you again?" "Not as a prince reclaiming his past, but as a man who wishes to know the woman you have become." Surprise crossed her features. That would not be appropriate, Your Highness." "Philip," he corrected. "And propriety has never been my primary concern where you are concerned." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "So I recall from your letters." He returned her smile, feeling a spark of the connection that had once flared so brightly between them. "Then you will permit me to visit?" She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "As you wish, Philip." And thus began a most unconventional courtship, conducted with the utmost discretion. Prince Philip, ostensibly engaged in scholarly pursuits, made regular visits to the Duchess of Wellington's library. The Tun, ever vigilant for signs of royal romantic inclinations, remained blissfully unaware that the object of the prince's attention was not some well-connected debutante but a librarian of obscure origins. Their conversations ranged widely, from literature and philosophy to politics and art. Philip discovered that the years had given Felicity not only education but wisdom and insight that both challenged and complemented his own perspectives. "You argue as though you've studied at Oxford," he remarked one afternoon as they debated the merits of Byron's latest work. "Cambridge, actually," she replied with a mischievous glint. "Though only through the books supplied by my employer's brother, who is a fellow there." "You've accomplished much since leaving my service." "Since leaving your household," she corrected gently. "I was never in your service, Philip. I was employed by your steward." "A fine distinction. But an important one." She shelved the volume they had been discussing. "I have built my life carefully, brick by brick. I am proud of what I have achieved through my own efforts." He watched her, admiring the graceful efficiency of her movements, the quiet confidence she now possessed. "As you should be. But does your pride preclude accepting affection freely offered?" Her hand stilled on the bookshelf. "Are we speaking hypothetically, Your Highness?" "We are speaking of you and me, Felicity. Of feelings that, despite 9 years and your best efforts to thwart them, refuse to be dismissed." She turned to face him, her expression guarded. "You cannot know what you feel for me now. We are practically strangers. Then let us remedy that." He stepped closer. "Allow me to court you properly." "There is nothing proper about a prince courting a librarian," she said with a rueful smile. "The scandal would echo through every drawing-room in London." "I care not for scandal. But you should care for your position, your duty to the crown. The expectations of your family and the nation." Her voice grew earnest. "These are not trivial concerns, Philip. They are the substance of your life and responsibility." He recognized the echo of their past in her words, the same arguments that had presumably led her to leave him 9 years before. But he was no longer that impetuous youth, ruled by passion alone. "I have never neglected my duty," he said quietly. "I have served the crown faithfully for 3 decades. But duty without happiness is a hollow existence, Felicity. I have tried to find that happiness with women of suitable background and breeding. None have stirred my heart as you do." "Perhaps because you've kept part of your heart locked away with those letters," she suggested. He considered this. "Perhaps. But now that I've found you again, I find my feelings are not merely echoes of the past. They respond to the woman you are now, educated, accomplished, and still possessing that innate kindness and intelligence that first drew me to you." Felicity shook her head, though he could see his words had affected her. "You speak of courtship as though it were a simple matter. But there are realities we cannot ignore." "The difference in our stations is considerable," he interrupted, "but not insurmountable. There are precedents for marriages between royalty and commoners." "Morganatic marriages," she said, revealing her knowledge of such arrangements. "Where the spouse does not share the royal's rank or privileges. Where any children are excluded from succession." "In some cases, yes. But there are other possibilities." He took her hand, pleased when she did not withdraw it. "I ask only that you allow me to explore them. That you do not flee from me again out of some misguided notion of protecting me from myself." She looked down at their joined hands. "And if I were to agree to this courtship, how would you propose to conduct it without creating a scandal that would harm your position?" "Discretion, initially," he admitted. "But not secrecy or shame. I would have us establish a foundation that could withstand the inevitable storm when our attachment becomes known." "You have thought this through," she said, sounding surprised. "I have had 9 years to consider what I would say should I ever find you again." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Will you grant me this chance, Felicity?" She raised her eyes to his, and he saw in them a cautious hope that mirrored his own. "I will consider it." It was not the unconditional acceptance he had hoped for, but it was far from rejection. Philip pressed her hand to his lips in a gesture of both promise and restraint. "That is all I ask. For now." The weeks that followed were filled with carefully orchestrated meetings, walks in secluded gardens, carriage rides along less frequented paths, and occasional evenings at small musical gatherings where a librarian's presence would not seem extraordinary. The Duchess of Wellington, a romantic at heart despite her formidable exterior, became an unwitting accomplice, often sending Felicity on errands that coincidentally aligned with the prince's movements. Spring blossomed into summer, and with it, Philip's hope that Felicity might eventually consent to a more formal arrangement. She had not explicitly accepted his courtship, but neither had she rejected his attentions. They had established a pattern of philosophical debate, literary discussion, and increasingly personal confidences that reminded him of their earlier connection while deepening it in ways his younger self could not have appreciated. "You never told me how you came to be at Montague Park," he said one afternoon as they walked the perimeter of Hyde Park, careful to maintain a respectable distance under the distant but watchful eyes of society. "After leaving London, I found employment in several households," she explained. "Each position brought new knowledge and connections. When I learned of an opening at your country estate, I confess I was curious about your life." "You spied on me?" He was more amused than offended. "Hardly. I simply wished to know that you had recovered from my departure." "I had not," he said frankly. "But I had learned to present the appearance of recovery." She nodded, understanding. "As had I." The admission thrilled him more than it should have. "You miss me, then?" "I missed who we were together," she clarified. The possibility of what might have been, had circumstances been different. "And now? Do you still believe our circumstances are so insurmountable?" Felicity glanced around to ensure they were not overheard. "I believe that you are still a prince, and I am still a woman of no significant birth or fortune. Society has not changed so dramatically in 9 years. But we have changed," he pressed. "We are no longer guided by pure emotion, but by considered thought. Surely that counts for something." "It counts for everything in terms of understanding," she conceded. But understanding the difficulties does not remove them. Philip recognized the wisdom in her caution, even as he chafed against it. What would convince you that a future together is possible, Felicity? She considered the question seriously. Evidence that such a union would not destroy your standing or create division within your family. Assurance that I would not be merely tolerated but accepted in your world. And most importantly, she met his gaze directly, certainty that what you feel is not simply the rekindling of an old attachment, but something that would endure the inevitable challenges we would face. Reasonable conditions, he acknowledged. And what of your own feelings? You speak of my attachments, but not of yours. A faint blush colored her cheeks. My feelings are not in question. It was as close to a declaration as she had come, and Philip treasured it accordingly. Then I shall endeavor to meet your conditions, one by one. The opportunity to begin doing so arose sooner than he anticipated. His cousin, Lady Patricia Morland, was hosting a small gathering at her country estate adjacent to Richmond Park. Known for her progressive views and artistic circle, Lady Patricia had often included individuals of merit regardless of their background. You must allow me to add a name to your guest list, Philip told her during a chance meeting at a musical performance. Anyone you wish, cousin, she replied with a knowing smile. Might this addition be the mysterious lady who has been occupying so much of your time of late? Philip maintained his composure, though inwardly he was startled. You are remarkably well informed. I observe, she corrected. You have declined no fewer than 12 invitations from the most eligible hostesses this season, yet you regularly visit the Duchess of Wellington's residence, ostensibly to consult her library. Her eyes twinkled. Unless you have developed a sudden passion for cataloguing systems, I suspect another attraction. Your discretion would be appreciated, he said quietly. Of course. But you should know that others have noticed as well. If you intend to pursue this connection, whatever it may be, you would do well to bring it into the light under controlled circumstances. She patted his arm. My gathering will provide exactly that, respectable introduction without the full scrutiny of the ton. And so it was arranged. Felicity, after considerable persuasion, agreed to attend as Lady Patricia's guest, introduced simply as a scholar of literature without emphasis on her employment. The evening arrived, and Philip found himself uncharacteristically anxious as he entered his cousin's drawing room. He scanned the assembled guests, his heart quickening when he spotted Felicity engaged in conversation with a prominent author. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk, more elegant than her usual attire but still modest compared to the elaborate fashions of the Tun's ladies. Her hair, usually confined severely, had been arranged in a softer style with a few artful curls framing her face. She looked, he thought with satisfaction, every inch a lady of quality. As though sensing his presence, she glanced up, and their eyes met across the room. The gentle smile that curved her lips sent a wave of warmth through his chest. Lady Patricia appeared at his elbow. Your scholar makes a favorable impression, cousin. Lord Kensington has been expounding on his latest manuscript for 20 minutes, and she has managed to appear both attentive and intelligent in her responses. She is intelligent, Philip replied, still watching Felicity. Remarkably so. And beautiful, in an understated way, his cousin observed. I approve, though I suspect my approval matters little to you. Philip turned to her with gratitude. On the contrary, it matters a great deal. As does your willingness to facilitate this introduction. Well then, let us complete the introduction properly. She took his arm and guided him toward Felicity's group. Lord Kensington, you simply must allow His Highness to join your literary discussion. He has been most eager to meet Miss Stangwood. The introductions were made with perfect propriety, though Philip noted the speculative glances exchanged among the other guests. News that the prince had specifically requested a particular lady's presence would spread rapidly, regardless of Lady Patricia's discretion. You look enchanting, he murmured when they were momentarily unobserved. I feel decidedly out of place, Felicity confessed. Lady Patricia has been most kind, but I've counted 3 countesses and a duke among the guests. All of whom are delighted by your conversation, I've no doubt. They are curious, she corrected. Which is not the same as acceptance. Before he could reassure her, they were joined by Lady Patricia's brother, the Earl of Huntington, whose interest in Felicity appeared more than merely polite. "Miss Stanwood, I understand you have made a study of the Romantic poets," the Earl said, positioning himself between her and Philip. "I should be most interested in your opinion of Wordsworth's latest publication." Philip observed with mingled amusement and irritation as the Earl engaged Felicity in an animated discussion. Her initial reserve gradually melted as the conversation turned to subjects where she could speak with authority. The transformation was remarkable, her posture relaxed, her gestures became more expressive, and her natural eloquence emerged. By the time dinner was announced, Felicity had drawn a small circle of admirers, all genuinely interested in her perspectives on literature and art. Philip, watching from a slight distance, felt a surge of pride mingled with a less noble emotion as the Earl of Huntington claimed her arm for the procession to the dining room. Lady Patricia, ever observant, arranged the seating to place Philip directly across from Felicity, allowing him to observe her throughout the meal. She handled the complex array of cutlery with practiced ease, evidence, he suspected, of careful study rather than birthright, and contributed to the conversation with increasing confidence. "Your Miss Stanwood is a revelation," Lady Patricia whispered as the ladies prepared to withdraw after dinner. "Huntington is quite captivated. I haven't seen him so animated in conversation since his return from the continent." The thought of Huntington's interest provoked an unexpected pang of jealousy. Philip reminded himself that this was precisely what he had hoped for, proof that Felicity could be accepted within his social circle based on her own merits. When the gentlemen rejoined the ladies in the drawing room, Philip found Felicity seated at the pianoforte, turning pages for one of the younger ladies who was performing. She glanced up as he approached, and he was gratified to see genuine pleasure in her expression. "Are you enjoying the evening?" he asked, keeping his tone appropriately casual for public consumption. "More than I anticipated," she admitted. "Your cousin has assembled a gathering of remarkably open-minded individuals." "Not all society would be so welcoming," he acknowledged. "But more than you might expect, particularly for someone of your accomplishments." She gave him a measured look. "You arranged this demonstration deliberately, didn't you?" "I merely created an opportunity." "You have made your own impression." The young lady at the pianoforte finished her piece, and after appropriate applause, Lady Patricia approached them. "Miss Stanwood, I understand from Huntington that you play. Would you honor us with a performance?" Felicity hesitated. "I play only moderately well, Lady Patricia." "Nonsense," Philip interjected. "I've heard you play at the Duchess's musicales. Your interpretation of Mozart is exceptional." With reluctant grace, Felicity took her place at the instrument. She selected a piece by Mozart, as Philip had suggested, and began to play. Her technique was indeed accomplished, not to the standard of a dedicated performer, but with feeling and precision that reflected years of practice. Philip watched the reactions of the assembled guests. There were nods of appreciation, genuine attention. No one exhibited the polite boredom that often accompanied obligatory performances at social gatherings. When she concluded, the applause was warm and authentic. The Earl of Huntington was particularly effusive in his praise, coming forward to turn the pages should she wish to continue. The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly, with Felicity gradually accepted as a natural part of the gathering rather than an oddity. By the time carriages were called, she had been invited to 2 literary salons and received Lady Patricia's open invitation to return. "A successful evening, I trust?" Philip asked as he escorted her to the Duchess's carriage. "Beyond anything I could have imagined," she admitted. "Your cousin is remarkable." "She is. But the credit for this evening's success belongs entirely to you, Felicity." He lowered his voice as they reached the carriage. "You have met my first condition admirably. You are already being accepted on your own merits." She smiled, though it was tinged with caution. One gathering with carefully selected guests is hardly representative of society as a whole. "It is a beginning," he insisted. "And a promising one." As he handed her into the carriage, their fingers lingered together a moment longer than propriety strictly allowed. "Will you meet me tomorrow?" "The usual place." She nodded, and as the carriage pulled away, Philip felt a surge of determination. The evening had confirmed what he already knew, that Felicity possessed the intelligence, poise, and character to hold her own in any company. The remaining challenges were substantial, but not, he increasingly believed, insurmountable. The following weeks brought a cautious expansion of Felicity's presence in Philip's social circle. Lady Patricia, recognizing the significance of her cousin's interest, arranged several small gatherings where Felicity could interact with individuals of influence without the pressure of a formal introduction to society. The Earl of Huntington's continued attention presented both an advantage and a complication. His obvious admiration lent Felicity a degree of social validation, yet Philip found himself increasingly irritated by the man's persistent attentions. "Huntington has invited me to view his collection of first editions," Felicity mentioned during one of their meetings in the Duchess's garden. "He has several manuscripts I've only read about in scholarly journals." Philip maintained a neutral expression with effort. "Indeed? And do you intend to accept this invitation?" "I had thought to. The Duchess has agreed to accompany me as a chaperone." She studied his face. "Unless you object." "Why should I object? Huntington is a respected collector. His library is renowned." He plucked a leaf from a nearby bush, shredding it between his fingers. "Though his interest in sharing it with you may extend beyond scholarly appreciation." A smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Are you jealous, Your Highness?" "Certainly not," he replied with dignity that fooled neither of them. "I merely observed that Huntington has been particularly attentive." "As have you," she pointed out gently. "Yet I have accepted your attentions without the benefit of a chaperone. That is entirely different. My intentions toward you are—" He stopped, aware he was being drawn into an admission he had not planned to make so directly. "Yes," she prompted, her eyes alight with a teasing warmth he found irresistible. "Honorable," he finished. And increasingly serious. The teasing light faded, replaced by something deeper. "Philip." "I know," he said quickly. "There are still obstacles. Your conditions have not all been met. But they will be, Felicity. I am more convinced of it with each passing day." She reached for his hand, a gesture of such natural intimacy that it made his heart swell. "I believe you believe that," she said softly. "But belief alone cannot change the world." "No," he agreed. "But it can change how we approach that world. Will you continue to give me the chance to prove it?" Her answer was a gentle pressure of her fingers against his. "Yes." The opportunity to address Felicity's second condition, acceptance within his family, arose unexpectedly through his younger sister, Princess Charlotte. Having returned from an extended stay in Bath, Charlotte summoned Philip to her apartments with typical sisterly peremptoriness. "Brother, I am positively drowning in gossip about you," she announced without preamble as he entered her sitting room. "Lady Patricia tells me you have developed a tendre for a bluestocking of mysterious origins. Is it true?" Philip sighed, taking the seat opposite his sister. "Patricia's discretion leaves much to be desired." "Oh, she was perfectly discreet. I simply refuse to be put off." Charlotte's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Well? Who is this paragon who has captured your interest when a decade of the ton's finest has failed?" He hesitated, then decided that directness was the best approach with his forthright sister. "Her name is Felicity Stanwood. She is currently employed as a librarian to the Duchess of Wellington." Charlotte's eyebrows rose. "A librarian? How novel." She studied him for signs of jest, then leaned forward with sudden interest. "You're serious about her?" "I am." "How extraordinary." She tapped her fan against her palm thoughtfully. "Is she very beautiful?" "She possesses a quiet loveliness," Philip replied. "But it is her mind, her character that distinguishes her." "A love match, then?" Charlotte's expression softened. "I had begun to think you incapable of such sentiment. I assure you, I am not." "And does she return your regard?" Philip smiled slightly. "She approaches the matter with more caution than I might wish, but yes, I believe she does." Charlotte nodded, suddenly businesslike. "I must meet her, of course." Not at court, that would be premature, but perhaps at my small musicale next week. Lady Patricia could bring her as a companion. The ease with which his sister accepted the situation surprised him. You don't object to her background? Why should I? We are not living in the Dark Ages, Philip. She waved a dismissive hand. The war has changed many things. Merit is increasingly valued over mere birth, at least in enlightened circles. Not all of the family will share your view, he cautioned. True. Our eldest brother will have opinions, as will mother. She pursed her lips. But they need not be consulted until matters are further advanced. Let me meet your librarian first, and we shall proceed from there. And so it was arranged. Lady Patricia, delighted to further the connection, agreed to bring Felicity to Princess Charlotte's musicale as her literary advisor, a transparent fiction, but one that provided the necessary social cover. The evening arrived, and Philip found himself watching anxiously as Felicity was presented to his sister. Charlotte, to her credit, received her with genuine warmth, engaging her in conversation for nearly half an hour while the other guests pretended not to observe this royal attention to an unknown lady. Your sister is remarkably kind, Felicity said later, when they had a moment of relative privacy near the refreshment table. Charlotte has always possessed an independent mind, Philip replied. She forms her own opinions rather than accepting those handed to her by society. A family trait, it seems, she observed with a small smile. Perhaps. Though I've never tested it quite so thoroughly before. He handed her a glass of lemonade. You've made a favorable impression. She has already invited you to her literary salon next month. Felicity's eyes widened. That's unexpected. Charlotte moves quickly once her mind is made up. Another family trait, he added with a smile of his own. The evening concluded with Felicity firmly established in Princess Charlotte's good graces, an achievement that Philip knew would significantly smooth their path forward. Charlotte's approval would not silence all opposition, but it provided a crucial ally within the royal family. As weeks turned to months, Felicity's presence in Philip's social circle became increasingly normalized. While speculation continued, particularly regarding the exact nature of their connection, the initial novelty had faded. She was now recognized as a scholar of note, a protégé of Princess Charlotte, and a regular participant in the more intellectual gatherings of the ton. The final condition remained, convincing Felicity that his feelings were not merely a rekindling of past attachment but a deeper, more enduring connection. This, Philip realized, could not be demonstrated through social maneuvering or family introductions. It required time and consistent action. He found his opportunity during a house party at Lady Patricia's country estate, where both he and Felicity had been invited along with a select group of friends and family. The informal setting allowed for greater freedom of movement and conversation than London society permitted. On the second evening, after the other guests had retired, Philip found Felicity in the library, examining a collection of botanical illustrations. I thought I might find you here, he said, closing the door softly behind him. The natural habitat of the librarian. She smiled without looking up from the volume. As predictable as that. Perhaps I should cultivate more mysterious habits. You remain sufficiently mysterious to me, he replied, moving to stand beside her. Each conversation reveals new facets. After all these months? I should think I'd grown terribly familiar by now. Familiar, yes. But in the way that a favorite book becomes more rather than less treasured with repeated reading. He touched the edge of the illustration she was studying. New details emerge, new connections form. She closed the book and turned to face him fully. A pretty metaphor, Your Highness. Philip, he corrected automatically. After all this time, surely we have moved beyond titles. In private, perhaps, she conceded. But habits of propriety are difficult to break. Some habits should be broken, he said, his voice lowering. Some barriers crossed. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibility. Felicity's gaze dropped to his mouth, then back to his eyes. Philip, she said softly, what are we doing? Building a future, he answered simply. Carefully, brick by brick, as you once described your own life's construction. A precarious construction, she murmured. Built on shifting sand. No, he disagreed. On solid ground. We have proven that society will accept you. My sister champions our connection. Even the more conservative members of my family have begun to acknowledge your merits. And yet, she said, there remains the fundamental question, can a prince truly marry a librarian? The direct reference to marriage, the first either had made, hung in the air between them. Is that what you wish? Philip asked, his heart racing. Marriage? Color rose in her cheeks, but she did not look away. I wish for clarity. For truth between us. If this courtship, for surely that is what it has become, is merely an extended flirtation, a romanticized version of what might have been 9 years ago, then we should acknowledge it as such. And if it is more, then we must consider the consequences with clear eyes, she replied. Not just for ourselves, but for your family, your position, your future. Philip took her hands in his. I have considered little else these past months. I have consulted legal experts discreetly. I have sounded out key members of the government. There are precedents, Felicity. Complex, certainly, but not impossible. Hope flickered in her eyes, quickly tempered by caution. Even if legally possible, the social implications would be managed, he finished for her. With difficulty at first, I don't deny it. But time and your own undeniable qualities would eventually win acceptance. You make it sound so certain, she whispered. Because I am certain. Of my feelings, of your worth, of our future. He raised her hands to his lips. I love you, Felicity. Not as a memory or an idealized dream, but as the woman you are now, intelligent, principled, and possessed of a strength I've only grown to appreciate more deeply with time. She drew a shaky breath. And I love you. I tried not to. I told myself it was impossible, impractical, doomed to disappointment. But my heart refused to listen to reason. Philip felt a surge of joy at her words, but he recognized that the battle was not yet won. Will you trust me to find a way forward? To create a path where none seemed to exist before? The library door opened abruptly, revealing Lady Patricia. Cousin, I apologize for the interruption, but a messenger has arrived from London. Your presence is required immediately, something about a diplomatic crisis with the French delegation. Philip reluctantly released Felicity's hands. I'll come at once. Lady Patricia withdrew, leaving them momentarily alone again. Duty calls, Felicity said with a sad smile. As it always must. This conversation is not finished, he insisted. Promise you won't retreat from me while I'm gone. I promise, she said. Though I make no promises about the conclusions I may reach in your absence. He touched her cheek gently. Fair enough. But know this, Felicity Sullivan, or Stanwood, or whatever name you choose, I intend to make you my wife. The only question remaining is whether you will consent to become a princess. With that declaration hanging in the air between them, he departed, leaving Felicity staring after him with a complex mixture of hope and trepidation. The diplomatic crisis kept Philip in London for a fortnight, during which time he exchanged letters with Felicity, proper, circumspect communications that nevertheless contained undercurrents of deep feeling. She had returned to her position with the Duchess, resuming her normal duties while contemplating the extraordinary choice before her. When Philip was finally free to return to Lady Patricia's estate, he found Felicity in the garden, seated on a stone bench with a book open in her lap. She looked up at his approach, her expression unreadable. Your Highness, she greeted him formally, rising to curtsy. I trust your diplomatic endeavors were successful. They were, he replied, studying her face for clues to her state of mind. Though tedious in the extreme. May I join you? She gestured to the bench, and they sat with a proper distance between them. For a moment, neither spoke. I've been thinking, Felicity began. Before you continue, Philip interrupted, I must show you something. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small leather portfolio. These arrived during my negotiations with the French. I believe they may be relevant to our discussion. Curious, Felicity accepted the portfolio and opened it. Inside were several documents bearing official seals. She scanned the first page, her eyes widening. These are letters patent. Granting you the title of Countess of Blackwell in your own right, he confirmed. A royal prerogative, rarely used but entirely within my authority. She stared at him. You've made me a countess. I've recognized your merit in a form that society understands, he corrected. The title comes with modest but respectable estates, enough to ensure your independence regardless of other developments. She carefully closed the portfolio. This changes nothing fundamental, Philip. A title granted yesterday does not change who I am, where I came from. No, he agreed. Nor would I wish it to. But it does change how the world will perceive our connection. A prince marrying a countess is merely a minor deviation from expectation, not a rupture of the social order. A convenient fiction, she murmured. A practical accommodation, he countered. The substance remains unchanged. I love the woman who organized my library and challenged my assumptions. I love the mind that finds patterns in chaos and beauty in ordinariness. The title merely removes the final practical obstacle. Felicity was silent for a long moment, weighing his words and the implications of the document she held. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I've tried, he said simply. Because you are worth every effort. She raised her eyes to his, and he saw in them a decision reached. Ask me, she said softly. Philip took her hands, the portfolio still clutched between them. Felicity Sullivan, Countess of Blackwell, woman of incomparable mind and spirit, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Her smile bloomed slowly, like the first ray of sunrise breaking over the horizon. Yes, Philip. Yes, I will. He raised her hands to his lips, then leaned forward to claim a kiss 9 years delayed but no less sweet for the waiting. I should warn you, Felicity said when they finally parted, that a librarian makes for an unconventional princess. Thank God for that, Philip replied fervently. The conventional ones have bored me senseless for years. Their laughter mingled in the garden air, the first notes of a harmony that would continue for a lifetime. And if society raised its collective eyebrows at the prince's choice of bride, it soon discovered that the new princess possessed qualities that transcended conventional expectations, much like the letters that had once been hidden away, waiting for their story to be completed.